The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Yesterday evening was perhaps one of the most remarkable evenings in the recent history of the Church. Our Holy Father, Pope Francis, gathered the world to St. Peter's. And he did something extraordinary in every sense of the word. He gave his Urbi et Orbi blessing to the city and to the world. A blessing which he only normally gives twice a year, once on Easter Sunday and once on Christmas Day. And yet he gave this blessing to an empty St. Peter's Square. I'm sure many of you were watching at home, and if you haven't seen it, I encourage you, go and see it. Look on our Facebook page, on YouTube, go and watch it again. In that empty square, just the Holy Father and his Master of Ceremonies sat in a rainy St. Peter's on a dark and cold evening. And he spoke and he preached something that came straight from his heart, based on the gospel of Jesus calming the storm. And there's a great mirror between what the Holy Father said yesterday evening and what we hear in our gospel tonight. Because the Holy Father pointed to the phrase of the disciples when the storm whips up in the boat and Jesus is asleep. They say, "Lord, do you not care that we're drowning?" Imploring the Lord to wake up to action. And we hear an echo of that in John's Gospel this evening, in this very long Gospel about the raising of Lazarus. In both the words of Mary and Martha, "Lord, if you had been here. Lord, if you had been here." Because it's very easy to despair. It's so easy, we know it is. And to look around the world at this moment, it's frightening. It's distressing. As the cases of the coronavirus increase, as the reality of what that means begins to sink in. And so that question of Mary and Martha is probably our question in our hearts, if we're truly honest with ourselves. Lord, if only you were here. Why are you not acting? Why are you not healing your world? Why this virus? Why any of this? The Holy Father, when he spoke about this same instinct, talked about this moment as being a moment of conversion. A moment when we can't hide behind other distractions anymore. We fill our lives with so many distractions, with work, with school, with everything. And then when we get home, what do? The television goes on. The internet goes on. There's no time for God. We make ourselves busy and we spend our entire time looking down. Instead of looking to the higher things, instead of looking to God, we focus on human-made things. And so when those human-made things disappear, because our world is turned upside down by something so drastic as this, it's frightening. It's terrifying. And so we turn to God in desperation. Lord, if only you were here. If only you did something right now. The most profound moment of that message of the Holy Father was shown in that blessing, that benediction that he gave at the very end. Because the Holy Father blessed the entire world. Every single one of us, wherever we were, whatever we were doing. And it's one of those moments when you really do feel like the entire Catholic world stood still in prayer. That every single person who was watching it, hundreds of thousands, stopped in prayer and turned back to God. This season of Lent is all about conversion. It's all about conversion. Looking at the things that are most important in our lives and saying, where is God in those things? Where is God? Is he at the centre or is he on the edge? And I think if we're all honest with ourselves, he's probably more on the edge than he ever is in the centre. If he's there at all. And so we find that this season helps us to focus the mind back on Christ, back on God who is love, back on God who died on the cross to redeem humanity. These last 3 weeks, the Gospel reading has been preparing us for Easter. It's been preparing us for that great moment at the Easter Vigil, when we proclaim Christ is risen. 2 weeks ago, we had the Samaritan woman at the well, and the Lord spoke about himself being living water. Last week, with the blind man, Christ spoke about himself as the light of the world. This week, he is the resurrection and the life. The waters of baptism, the flame of faith, and the life that God gives us. That's what we're preparing for. That's what we're putting back in the centre of our lives. That's what God offers. That even though everything around us seems dark and gloomy, even though the Holy Father was speaking to an empty square, God is there amongst his people. God is there in our hospitals right across the country, with our doctors, nurses, paramedics, all the staff who are working to care for those with the virus. God is there with all the lonely. God is there in each of our houses when we invite him in. We need to turn back to God. Stop focusing on all these little things in our lives. Well, we've got a helping hand now. May not have been the way we wanted it, but we have. With this virus, it helps us focus on what's important. It helps us re-engage with God. Find that time. 2 weeks tomorrow, 2 weeks this evening, we'll be celebrating the Easter Vigil. The entire focus of the church now is shifting toward remembering those events of Holy Week and the cross and his resurrection. Let's use this time to put away the doubts and the uncertainties, to get rid of that sole notion of despair and focus on Christ. Focus on he who is the resurrection and the life. Let's turn our minds and our hearts back to God. So when Easter comes, that celebration will be all the greater. That we will truly be that much closer to God who reaches out to his people. That we will be with God and live and move and have our being in him.